back to a time when you were extremely happy. Whether it was winning the championship or getting a good grade on the test, it doesn't matter. Just think back to a time where you were very, very happy. A lot of times people think emotions such as happiness, anger, or surprise are only psychological traits. But what they don't account for is with these psychological responses come biological activations. When you score that game-winning goal or you get a 1500 on the SATs, those tiny little brain chemicals in your head are making you feel the way you feel. Welcome to Biological Psychology. I am your host, Tim Stedman. Please strap in. It's going to be a bumpy ride. Let's go! Psych class, I hope you enjoyed my overdramatic introduction. I don't know, I just decided to wing it and that's what I was feeling. Went for it. I think I perfected it. Love it. Welcome back to our AP Psychology review. In this review, we are going to be focusing on the biological basis of psychology. The biological basis of psychology is going to center around the biological perspective, which aims to explain behavior through physiological means. So we're going to be looking at a lot of things centered around genetics and the nervous system. In this review, we are going to focus on neural communication and how one neuron communicates a message to another. We're going to be taking a look at neurotransmitters and how these tiny little brain chemicals make you feel the way you feel and act the way you act. We're going to look at the structure of the nervous system and the specific roles of both the peripheral and central nervous system. We're going to dive deep into the brain and its many parts and functions. We're also going to take a very brief look at the endocrine system and how it works along with the nervous system to communicate information throughout the body. And last, we're going to touch upon sleep and why sleep is important to keep us psychologically sane. So, the nervous system is going to be the body's primary communication network. Inside of your brain, you have billions of tiny cells called neurons, whose job it is to communicate information throughout the body. Brain tissue no longer than a grain of salt contains upwards to 10,000 neurons. Just like Batman has Robin, every neuron has a glial cell. Glial cell. We're going with glial cell. The glial cell is much smaller than the neuron, but is going to provide the specific function of removing cell waste and providing nutrition so the neuron can function as needed. There are three types of neurons we need to know about. Number one is going to be an afferent neuron or a sensory neuron. Number two is going to be an efferent neuron or a motor neuron. And our third and final neuron is going to be the interneuron. Sensory neurons serve two important functions. Its first function is going to take information from the environment and report it back to the brain. This is so things like light or sound for our vision and hearing can get to the brain. Our sensory neurons are also going to take in information from our internal organs and skin. This is so when we stub our toe or hit our shin on that end table, it's our sensory neurons letting our brain know to send the maximum pain decibels down to your leg. Our motor neurons are responsible for communicating information to the muscle and glands of the body. A single blink of the eye activates upwards to 10,000 motor neurons. Both sensory and motor neurons are going to be part of the peripheral nervous system. And last but not least, we have the interneuron, the number one neuron in terms of numbers in the nervous system. The interneuron is in charge of communicating information from neuron to neuron. The interneuron is part of the central nervous system. Now that we know about the different types of neurons, we have to know how they communicate with one another. The key term to know for neural communication is action potential. The action potential is going to be a brief electrical impulse gathered by the dendrites and the cell body that is going to stimulate the cell enough to allow a message to be transmitted along the axon. For a neuron to have an action potential, it must receive enough stimulation to reach its stimulus threshold. This allows the neuron enough energy to depolarize and produce an action potential. This all stems from the idea of a law called the all or none law, which basically states that a neuron will receive enough stimulation to produce an action potential, or it will not receive enough stimulation and it will fail to produce an action potential. Putting the all or none law into perspective. So I want you to imagine you are at the top of a large mountain and there's a boulder right up against the edge. You can push the boulder a little bit, you can push it a good amount, you can run up and smash your body up against it, but no matter what happens, it doesn't move. It stays at the top of the mountain. So let's say you come back with a couple of buddies. At the count of 3, you all run up against the boulder, and with enough force, you push it off the edge, and it goes tumbling straight down the mountain. Now, this boulder is going all the way down the mountain. It's not going to stop midway through. It's not going to reset and go back to the top. It is going all the way down until something gets in its way to stop it. So the boulder has two options. It can either stay at the top, or it can go all the way down to the bottom. It doesn't matter if it took 4 people to run into the boulder to knock it all the way down, or if it took 2 cars to ram into the boulder to knock it all the way down. As long as it receives just the minimum amount of force to get pushed over that ledge, it is going to go all the way down. The same is true for neural communication. As long as the neuron receives just the minimum amount of stimulation to produce an action potential, it will always produce an action potential. So our action potential has occurred. Now what? Well, the neuron has to communicate the message. When 2 neurons meet, they create a synapse. At the synaptic gap, these neurons do not touch. Instead, a tiny fluid-filled space is created where the message can be passed through. The presynaptic neuron is the name of the neuron that sends the message, while the postsynaptic neuron is the name of the neuron that is receiving the message. What exactly are these neurons communicating from one another? Well, for the most part, they're going to be chemical messengers known as neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters are very, very tiny brain chemical messengers. So tiny, in fact, to find a neurotransmitter, it'd be like finding a grain of rice in a swimming pool. However, these chemicals pretty much control the way we think, feel, and behave. The important neurotransmitters to know for the AP test are going to be acetylcholine, dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, gamma-aminobutyric acid or GABA, endorphins, and glutamate. Each one of these have a specific function for the body. A neurotransmitter can either be excitatory or inhibitory, which basically means when the neurotransmitter is active, it is either going to speed up brain functioning or slow it down. When a neuron releases a neurotransmitter into the synaptic gap, oftentimes the presynaptic neuron will recycle the neurotransmitter using a process called reuptake. Reuptake is an important process to understand because a lot of medicines used to treat many psychological disorders manipulate the process of reuptake in order to produce a desired effect. An example of this are medicines such as Prozac or Zoloft, which help treat depression. These medicines are categorized as SSRIs, which stand for selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. What they do is they stop the reuptake of serotonin and allow this serotonin to flood the synaptic gap. This produces the happiness effect. Next, we're going to move on to the structure of the nervous system. The nervous system can be divided into 2 separate systems, the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system contains the brain and spinal cord and is the central location for all behaviors and mental processes. The brain works as the command center while the spinal cord handles all incoming and outgoing messages. The peripheral nervous system is the division of the nervous system that consists of all the nerves lying outside your entire body, so all the nerve endings going throughout your legs, arms, everywhere. The peripheral nervous system includes 2 subdivisions, the autonomic nervous system and the somatic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system regulates involuntary functions such as heartbeat, breathing, and digestion. 2 parts of the autonomic nervous system, so the 2 subdivisions, the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. They are also in charge of automatic processes. The sympathetic nervous system is responsible for our flight or fight response. That is activated when we believe we are in an emergency. The parasympathetic nervous system there is to bring our body back to equilibrium after we have been in a period of alarm or alert. While the somatic nervous system helps with all of our voluntary functions. Things like walking to our car, grabbing a drink are all possible because of our somatic nervous system. Due to the advancements in science, the invention of different brain scans such as the MRI and the CAT scan, we now know more than ever about the functions of the brain. There are many areas of the brain that you need to know for the AP test, and we just don't have enough time in this video review to go over each and every one of them. So what I'm going to try and do is touch base upon the ones that I think are important. So make sure you still get those note cards out and study those brain areas. We can categorize the brain into 3 parts: the hindbrain, the cerebral cortex, and the limbic system. So including areas such as the medulla, pons, and cerebellum, the hindbrain is responsible for all things survival related. This includes functions such as sleeping, breathing, and motor activity. The cerebral cortex is going to contain all the major lobes of the brain. This includes the occipital lobe for sight, the temporal lobe for hearing, the frontal lobe for important cognitive functions such as emotional expression and problem solving, and the parietal lobe for somatic sensations such as pressure and temperature. The limbic system is a set of structures in our brain that deal with emotion and memory. The limbic system also regulates all autonomic nervous system and endocrine functions relating to emotional stimuli and behavioral reinforcement. With all the research we have done on the brain, we just keep discovering more and more cool things about it, like the fact that your brain has the ability to change its physical structure. Neuroplasticity is going to be the brain's ability to change and reorganize its synaptic connections. This can be done in one of 2 ways. 1. Structural plasticity. Structural plasticity is when the brain changes its physical structure as a result of learning. So if I'm teaching myself how to juggle, the synaptic connections in my brain are actually changing the physical structures of my brain. So yeah, right here, the old brain ski's improving right in front of your eyes. Our second method of plasticity is going to be functional plasticity. This involves more with brain damage. So when a specific area of the brain is damaged, the function of the damaged area can actually be brought to another area of the brain and it can replace that function. Next, we have the endocrine system. The endocrine system is the system in our body that regulates all of our glands and hormones. There's not too much we need to know about the endocrine system for the AP Psych test, so we just go over the absolute basics. The endocrine system regulates hormones. Hormones can lead to behavioral changes, right? An example of this is going to be our fight or flight response. When flight or fight occurs, adrenaline is released, leading to a behavioral change. A very important aspect of the endocrine system that you do want to know about is the pituitary gland. Often referred to as the master gland, the pituitary gland produces stimulating hormones that activate the production of major bodily hormones. The pituitary gland lies right underneath the hypothalamus. And now for our final topic of this review session and my absolute favorite, sleep. So scientists theorize two major reasons for why we sleep: the restorative theory and the adaptive theory. The restorative theory basically states that we're going to sleep so that we can repair and restore both our body and brain. Theory states that if we did not receive sleep, that our brain and body would eventually break down over time. While the restorative theory is going to explain our need for sleep, the adaptive theory explains why we sleep when we do. The adaptive theory basically states that we sleep at night because we're more vulnerable to predators at night. So when we're tucked away in our cozy caves, we're not going to be vulnerable to predators. This kept our caveman ancestors out of harm's way. In our brain, there's a small cluster of neurons known as the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN for short. The SCN is located in the hypothalamus and is responsible for controlling our circadian rhythm. What is the circadian rhythm exactly? Well, I am glad you asked. The circadian rhythm is our own 24-hour biological clock that is going to work as our sleep-wake cycle. So you just put your phone down after telling yourself you were going to bed 2 hours ago and start to try and fall asleep. I'm sure you've been there, and we've all done it. Well, what's exactly going on in our head while that's happening? Due to technology such as the electroencephalograph, or EEG for short, we are able to see exactly what happens when we are falling asleep. According to sleep scientists, we go through two major stages of sleep: NREM sleep, or non-rapid eye movement sleep, and REM sleep, which is rapid eye movement sleep. We're going to start by talking about non-rapid eye movement sleep. NREM sleep can be characterized into three separate stages. During stage 1 of NREM sleep, our alpha brainwaves turn into theta brainwaves, which basically means our brain is starting to slow down and disengage from the outside world. This stage is the onset of sleep, and it only lasts a few minutes. Stage 2 NREM sleep is going to be characterized by two types of brainwaves called sleep spindles and K-complex. During stage 2, your brain activity continues to decrease and we see the emergence of delta brainwave. If you ever woken yourself up from your arm twitching or your leg jerking, chances are you just woke yourself up during stage 2 NREM sleep, because behaviors like that are very common during this stage. In our last stage of NREM sleep, stage 3, it is going to be characterized by a majority of our brainwaves being delta brainwaves. During this stage, all outside stimuli is going to be cut off. And the final stage of our sleep cycle is going to be rapid eye movement sleep, or REM sleep. This is known as rapid eye movement sleep because during this stage, our eyes are constantly darting back and forth, as seen here. Pretty weird looking, actually. Kind of freaks me out. Anyways, moving on. Our visual neurons and motor neurons are active just as they would be in wakefulness, and this is also the stage of sleep where dreams occur. Each sleep cycle lasts roughly 90 minutes, so during our recommended 8 or so hours of sleep, we should be going through about 5 sleep cycles. Well, what happens if we're not getting those recommended 8 hours of sleep like we should be? Well, then we can experience sleep deprivation, which has both physical and psychological symptoms. Some of you also may be thinking, hey, you know what? I've gotten home from school pretty tired, taken a nap for about 30 minutes, and I swear to you I've had a dream during that 30-minute time period. Well, how exactly is that possible if it takes longer than that to get into REM sleep? Well, good question, theoretical student of mine who asks more questions than my real student. So if that happens, chances are that is a good sign of sleep deprivation. What's happening is something called REM rebound. This is when your body is deprived of REM sleep, so it goes and jumps into REM sleep a lot quicker in the sleep cycle, and REM sleep will also last longer. Whether you're being chased by an axe-wielding murderer and unfortunately can only run at the speed of 0.5 miles per hour, or you're at work at school and then you wake up just in time to have to get ready to go to work or school, Yeah, that one happens to me a lot. Dreams are going to be the thoughts, images, and sensations going on in our head that occur during sleep. In the times of ancient civilizations, such as the Greeks and Egyptians, dreams were actually considered supernatural occurrences, or they meant some type of divine intervention. More recently, we have more ways of explaining why dreams occur. Sigmund Freud considered dreams to be the royal road to the unconscious. So the psychoanalytical perspective on dreams is going to focus a lot on the unconscious mind. Freud believed that when we go to sleep, our ego defense mechanisms are lowered and repressed material comes through to awareness in a distorted form, this being our dream. Freud categorized dreams into two types of content. Our first type of content is going to be our manifest content. This is the content of the dream that you remember, while latent content is going to be the hidden meaning behind the dream. So let's say you go to bed one day, now all of a sudden you are 50,000 feet plummeting to the ground. Just before making contact, you wake up in a panic. Curious as to why you had this dream, you do a quick Google search and find out it could be because there's an aspect of your life where you feel like you are losing control. The dream of you falling would be the manifest content, while the hidden meaning of you losing control would be considered the latent content. Freud believed that identifying and understanding the latent content of our dreams is the key to understanding our inner conflicts. Next, we have the activation synthesis theory of dreaming, which explains dreams from a biological standpoint. During sleep, our limbic system is going to become more active while our frontal lobe decreases in activity. Our brain is then going to interpret random neural activity and try to make sense of it, thus creating a dream. So that's it for our Unit 2 review. Thanks for tuning in. Just a friendly reminder, make sure that you are sticking to those textbook readings. Remember, we did not go over absolutely everything you need to know for Unit 2 to get a good grade on this AP Psych test. So please, like I said earlier, keep digging into those note cards, keep reading that textbook, and then you will do fine on the AP test. As always, email me if you need me. Stay tuned for our Unit 3 review on learning.